Time to head out into the great wide open in a manner of speaking, because Nature Guide with Nature Northwest Angus Kennedy joins us on the line now. And Angus, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, John. How are you?
Very well. Now let's talk about an animal that, I always think a magnificent animal, but one that we don't see, or I don't see that often. It's quite elusive, and that is the hare.
The hare, yeah. The hare is a fantastic creature, and it's one of our true natives. A lot of the mammals that are in Ireland have been brought in or introduced by people at some stage, maybe thousands of years ago, but at some stage, where it's believed that the Irish hare, or the mountain hare, as it's also known as, is a true Irish native mammal that was here before any people came. Okay. It's been successful here for thousands of years, and thankfully, certainly in Donegal, still does quite well.
Much larger than rabbits, but one of the unique things about it is that the females tend to be a little larger than the males.
Yeah, the females are the biggest of the two, and they're considerably bigger than rabbits, yeah. And in fact, they're quite different, really. They have quite different kind of habits. They do different things. The rabbits live in big numbers in their warrens, big kind of colonies, or big numbers of them, whereas the hares are much more on their own. Now, they will share a bit of space with other hares, but they don't gather in the big numbers like rabbits do. They're a much larger creature with longer ears. Yeah. A longer body altogether. The back legs, which are very strong in a rabbit, are even more kind of dominant and strong in the hare. And when you see the hare moving, it really kind of lopes along. And that's one way to kind of tell it, because those big back legs really push the back half of the hare up in the air as it kind of ponders along, if it's not running, if it's not going very fast. The
colour is usually brown, is that right?
Yes, they're brown, but they're quite pale underneath. And being mountain hares, there's mountain hares all across Europe. The mountain hares, a lot of mountain hares in other countries tend to turn completely white in the wintertime. Ours do to a certain extent, as in the colour changes a little bit, but really they still stay brown on top and white underneath. It's believed that the Irish hare is its own subspecies. It's been here this long, looking after itself this long and surviving. I have them in my own garden. They pass through the fields here. If you're looking out for them, a good place, first thing in the morning or last thing in the evening, well, especially early in the morning, and there's plenty of people up early these days doing their walks and whatnot, and listening out to the bird song, and watch out in fields and the centre of fields as well. That's often the place they'll hide out, because the foxes will be patrolling along the edges, along the cover of the hedgerows, and the hares know this.
And where do they live? Do they have like a burrow, or where? What's their habitat? Where?
Yes, so that's another one of the big differences between the rabbits and the hares. So they like grassland, is what they like, and they'll eat all sorts of different, dandelion leaves and sorrels and that kind of thing. They'll also chew as I found out when I moved into my own place and I planted a load of trees, they'll chew the bark of the trees, and they find that very nutritious when they're young. Once the trees get established a little bit, then they're fine. So if you've hares about and you're planting trees, it's worth putting a little protective thing around the base of the trees, just for the first year or two. You won't need it after that. But that's the kind of things they eat and the kind of habitats they'll be in. But they don't form burrows or a warren like a rabbit does. They have what they call a form. So if any dog owners out there, if you think quite often you'll see a dog in the evening time going round and round and round in a circle, in a tight little circle on the one spot, and it might even be just on the rug in front of your fire. And hares do something similar, because they go round and round and round, and they'll flatten a little bit of grass, and that's what is called a form, and that's where they'll sleep, and that's where they'll rest during the day, waiting for the evening time when they can go off and forage.
But is it the one place that they keep? Is it like a nest, or is it one small area where they keep coming back to, or is it would they sleep in different places every night?
They'll sleep in different places. Yes, they'll move about quite a good bit. They'll have territories. They'll have territories that they'll roam over. Those territories can be quite large, and they can overlap with other hares. But they could sleep in different spots every night, kind of thing. Now, their young is a little bit different. Their young are called leverets. A leveret is the name for a baby hare. And the leverets, they are left in one little spot, and they're left there for a good few days before they budge from there at all. And mum only comes to feed them once a day. Feeds them usually in the evening time when it's getting very dark, and it feeds with this very, very rich milk, just a very short, sharp, fast feed, and it's able to grow quite quickly at that. When they're born, when the leverets are born, they're born with their eyes open, they're born with fur on, so they're already able to kind of survive and move about if they had to in an emergency. But this time of year, I often have people contacting me saying they've found a baby hare, what should they do? And the thing is to leave it alone, because mum will have maybe 3 or 4 leverets scattered around, hidden under bushes, hidden in thick grass or in rushes, and if it can't find them, if they've been disturbed, it will try and look for them, but that baby hare could well be abandoned. So that if you do come across one of these, thing is definitely leave it alone.
Although it's born with its eyes open and with fur, the mortality rate for young hares is very high.
It's huge, yeah, it's huge, because they're staying put. They're really relying on stealth, which is all well and good, but if we're able to find them and come across them, well, think about how well something like a fox that is relying on them, or even some birds of prey, the likes of buzzards, and eagles, of course, the golden eagles that have been reintroduced, they thrive on hares and they do very well. They're an important food source for them. But even at that young age, after about 3 or 4 days, they're able to start moving about themselves and they start spreading around. They still rely on mum for about 3 weeks, but they'll move around. They'll find different little forms for them to rest up in while they're waiting for mum to come back and feed them. And they're incredibly fast. If you see a hare bolting, you'll know all about it. They can hit top speeds of up to 70 kilometres an hour, which is over 40 miles an hour. It's amazing, really.
Absolutely, very fast, yeah. And they now would be the popular time for breeding, but they can breed through the year. Is that right?
Yeah, they can. The mad as a March hare. That phrase, where that comes from, is when the breeding season really starts to kick off in early spring, and the hormones really start to take over. The males are all vying for each other, and quite often for the females. Now the females are larger, remember, as you said at the beginning there, so they'll quite often want to fight off the intention of the males. So that's where the boxing comes from. So if you see boxing going on like that, it can be 2 rival males, but more often it's a female telling one of the males, back off, I've no interest in you, keep away from me. And it's an amazing thing to see. I've been lucky enough to see it in my own garden here, but if you're watching out for these kind of things, you'll often come across them. And they can do that at this time of year too. It doesn't have to be March, but March is when that season really kicks off and when they're really all getting excited. But they'll breed 2 times, maybe even 3 times over the year, because they need to have lots of babies, because as you rightly said, a lot of the babies don't survive. A lot of them they've a lot of predators out there.
And they are a protected animal.
They certainly are protected, yeah. Hare coursing is still allowed in certain parts of Ireland. It's very kind of controversial sport, really. And I think it's a dying sport, really. I don't think there's many people that are too interested in it. But it still does go on. But absolutely, you need a licence for that. So they are a protected creature. And rightly so. They're a fabulous creature. Our fastest terrestrial, our fastest land mammal that's there. And they don't do you any damage or any harm. They're a wonderful thing to see.
A caller lives in Creeslaw, and every night a hare plus 5 of her babies come into her garden. They're now feeding. She's now feeding them every day. Can they, or should they, be doing anything else?
No, just watch and enjoy. That's fantastic. Very quickly now, those young hares, those young leverets, which is the funny name for the baby hare, those leverets will start to move around. Now, quite often they'll stay in the same area. So they'll hopefully still see them coming into the garden for the next few weeks as they get bigger, but they'll be moving more independently. But do keep an eye and just observe the size of them, because they grow so quickly. It's incredible, really, how fast they turn from a tiny little ball of fluff into a fully grown hare, which is a good-sized creature. So
watch and enjoy this free nature show.
Yeah, and then if you're out wandering in the garden, they probably know this themselves, you'll quite often startle them, because they are relying, especially the young ones, they're relying on that stealth, so they'll burst out of the undergrowth or out of the tall grasses. It's yet another reason, we so often say this, but it's yet another reason to leave wild areas in your garden. The lazy gardening, as I like to call it. Leave little patches of grasses to grow. You don't know what kind of lovely wildflowers will come up on it, but it also could be sheltering a hare. Even if it's only for a night or two, you could be doing them a big favour.
Speaking of great nature shows, one of our visiting birds can now be seen flying madly and usually around houses and rooftops, and that's the swift, and they really do put on a fantastic aerial show.
The swifts are back, and swifts were spotted certainly in Ramelton and around Letterkenny last week, and more they'll be coming in now. This cold weather, these northerly winds might be holding off numbers of them for a few days, but that will change, I think, by the weekend. It's always worth, when you're wondering about migrating birds, it's always worth kind of thinking, what is the prevailing wind doing for the next few days? What's it going to do? And hopefully by next week we'll start seeing more of them coming. They're incredible birds. There's a fossilised swift found from 50 million years ago in Germany. Wow. And it's pretty much the exact same as swifts today. So they've been around for a phenomenal amount of time. 50 million years ago these things had evolved, and they are the perfect flying bird. Swift are one of the fastest birds of all, certainly in a straight line. They're the fastest. Now, peregrines will be faster diving down, and maybe some other birds of prey. But in a straight line, the swifts are the fastest of the lot of them. So it's a very apt name for them.
And they're always in the air.
And they're always in the air. That's the thing. They're as close, I think, to not of this earth. They are just in the air the whole time. They breed in the air. They sleep in the air. They do all their feeding in the air. They drink in the air. They're able to catch little raindrops in the air. Now, they do scoop up water sometimes, like a swallow might, but they're able to catch raindrops in the air. They catch their nesting material in the air. It's quite incredible. So the only time that they come and touch land or touch something solid is when they come in to breed, which is in the next few weeks. They're checking out their nest sites.
So they don't sit on wires?
So they don't sit on wires. So unlike the swallows and the house martins. So the house martins are the ones that build on the outside of your house and have the little white patch on the back. And the swallows have the long tail streamers. And they'll go into the sheds and the barns and whatnot. Whereas the swift is all black. There's a slightly paler patch underneath its throat, but it's pretty much all black. They have a short little V and what looks like very stiff wings, but they're just incredible flyers. The wings themselves, the joints of the wings, they're quite like hummingbirds. They can rotate a little bit like maybe an oar of a boat might rotate, if you can imagine that. Which means that because with very stiff, straight wings, that often makes a bird not so manoeuvrable. Very fast at flying, very capable at flying, but not so manoeuvrable. But then with that rotation that they have in their kind of wing sockets, their arm, shoulder sockets, I suppose, they're able to adjust their angle and catch a phenomenal amount of bugs.
Their numbers are going down, though.
They are, and it's a tragic thing. So if you think that this amazing creature that evolved over 50 million years ago and has been exploring Earth for all of that time, comes over here, arrives in Ireland in May, breeds here, breeds in our tall buildings, in little gaps underneath the tiles and whatnot, and then heads off back to Africa. But the birds that bred last year in Ramelton or in Donegal town or in Ballybuffet or in Letterkenny, they're breeding all over our towns in unfortunately smaller and smaller numbers. But the birds that left those nests, they haven't landed, and they won't land this year, and there's a good chance they won't even land next year. They'll come back all right with the others, but they won't actually land. They won't be old enough to breed until they're at least 2, if not 3 years. So they literally won't touch anything solid. It's quite incredible. But unfortunately, the way that we change our buildings, and by blocking up all those little holes for a variety of different reasons, we're blocking up their nesting sites. And in Ireland, we're not good enough yet, and that's why it's great to be able to talk about these amazing birds. We're not good enough yet at looking out for our nature. If we were in Holland or if we were in Germany and we were doing some repairs to our house and blocking up some various different holes to get rid of drafts or whatever else, that'd be perfectly okay. But we would have to put in it's what they call swift blocks, which are basically little hollow blocks which have a little slit in it that the swift can go in and nest in. And that's something that should be mandatory, should be just a law here, should be required. And in fact, we all should be trying to do it because they're these most incredible creatures.
And it would be easy done if it was introduced to all new builds.
Very easily done, very easily done. Yeah, and you can, if you have a look at that, have a look at Birdwatch Ireland's great new website, and they have in their shop they have net or Swift boxes. They've also plans for how to make Swift boxes, and you can buy Swift bricks, which can be put directly into buildings if you're refurbishing the church or the town hall or whatever it is.
Yeah, because somebody might not want them, necessarily on their house or in their house or attached to their house, but would be quite happy to build a Swift box.
Yeah, complete. And remember, they're not going to go into the house itself. They're not going to head into the attic. So even if they're there currently at the moment, they're not doing any damage or any harm whatsoever. And quite the opposite, actually, because they're scooping up. They can scoop up 500 bugs in an hour or more, perhaps. So they're eating up a phenomenal amount of bugs from all around.
If they're like the starlings in our house, then they would leave a bit of a mess, though.
They might leave a little bit, but it'd be inside that cavity that you kind of won't see so much.
Because the starlings are leaving a trail.
The starlings are much messier.
You could you could follow the trail just to exactly where they are in the eaves.
The starlings, yeah, they can be messier and they can be noisier too. And they investigate and they thump and they scratch a wee bit more.
The young are out now, and and there's certain times of the day when obviously they need to be fed. And in fact, I was sitting having my breakfast this morning. I was watching the mum bringing food into them. But oh boy, are they noisy when they're hungry.
They are. They are. They let it be known. Yeah. And you see, they have to be, because it's really a case of who shouts the loudest. So they have that bright yellowness inside their mouth when they open up, and that triggers the mum. They respond to that colour. But also, whoever is shouting the loudest will get the most amounts of little meals. The mum and dad do their best to try and feed them as evenly as possible, but they need to shout. But remember, that shouting only lasts for another week or two, and those starlings are gone. It doesn't last very long at all. They're as anxious as possible. In fact, probably only a few days if they're at that stage in your house. They're as anxious as possible to get out and about and start eating up the bugs off your vegetables and off your flowers. But at the meantime, when you're curling up tonight going to sleep, when all of us listening to this are going to sleep, think of the swifts tonight. They will be up to 3,000 metres, 3 kilometres above our heads, going to sleep. They can vary their speed while flying, while sleeping, for different winds. So if the wind changes tonight and it changes direction or it gets stronger or it gets lighter, they can compensate for that while still being in a kind of dozing state high above us.
So they kind of float around in the wind high above us.
Yeah, so they just don't land. They stay up there the whole time. They head back to Africa in late July. Late July, first week of August. Once the numbers of bugs start to go down, they're gone. They're out of here. So enjoy them now, because they're only here for this few weeks. They've recorded them. We've put tiny little microchips onto them, which they were able to satellite record them a few years ago. And they found one swift did over 5,000 kilometres in 5 days to get back to its breeding grounds. So they really are the most amazing little creature and closest to not being of this earth. And they come and visit us every summer.
A texter says, we have a pair of doves nesting in the garden. Is it true that they mate for life?
The doves will stick together, yeah, absolutely, if they can. I wonder which they are. Are they the collared dove, which have the little black collar around their neck, and then there's the wood pigeon have the white collar around their neck. The wood pigeon are the kind of the heavier character. And they can nest pretty much at any time of year. Obviously, this is their preferred time, but they can nest very early in the year or very late in the year. And if you can find out where they're nesting, and if you can stand onto the tree, they like to nest quite high up, you can quite often see their eggs. They build very, very flimsy little nests out of really thin little branches. But they're great little creatures too.
Someone says that there's a black worm or worm-looking insects, as it's described, and they're coming into our house. There's a hard shell and they curl into a ball. What are they, and how do I stop them coming in?
Oh, they might be the wireworms, as people call them, which are a type of millipede. And you'll know they're a millipede if you get a close look at them. Each little segment. So if you can imagine the segments on a normal worm, millipedes have lots of these little segments, and out of each segment will come 2 legs each side. And that's how you tell. So they don't have 1,000 legs, but they do have a lot of them. And it's a great fun thing to do with children, actually, is to scoop up a few of them, put them in your hand, and really gently curl your fingers around them, and they'll try and push their way out with all of those legs at the same time, and they're surprisingly strong for such a small little thing. So they eat up little bits of dead leaves and whatnot. They're important decomposers, so they break down the dead leaves and the dead plants and whatnot, and help the process of turning all that stuff into mud. So if you have any of if you have any kind of area with that kind of debris in front, if you clear that out, sweep that out, and there's a good chance you'll get rid of the source of them. Okay. Because at this time of year, or sometimes a bit later actually, they will start to head off for whatever triggers them. They want to head off to new grounds, and they will just walk. They will try and walk through anything that's there. So if there's a house in the way, if there's a fence in the way, they'll go under it, over it, through it, or any way they can.
This is the time of year, Angus, when the willow seeds are floating in the air, and I suppose if we look closely, we can see this. Are willow trees the only trees where this happens?
Yeah, it's a very beautiful thing. It's nearly a kind of dreamlike thing. That you can get, especially for a couple of days, and the willows have just started. Dandelions are also doing it, and we mentioned dandelions a few weeks ago, and their flowers. Now the dandelions will keep flowering, but their flowers that have been pollinated by those first bees to emerge have turned into little seeds, and the seeds have the little kind of wispy umbrellas, so they'll start to blow as well. And if you have a field that hasn't been too heavily sprayed and there's still a lot of dandelions in it, you can often see that big wisp. But the really light little fluffy bits with the tiny black spots in the middle are the willow seeds, and if you get a nice big willow bush, they will release thousands upon thousands upon thousands of these seeds right now. And not many trees do that at this time of year. So elm trees, they drop their seeds right about now, and they have little papery kind of seeds with a little seed in the middle, and they won't drift or blow like that kind of wispy stuff like the willows. And then all of the willows do, and poplars do as well. But most other trees, it's autumn time. But it's a very clever and very effective way of dispersing their seeds. And because we see how prolific willow is, it can pop up anywhere where there's a bit of damp ground at all, or quite often in cracks in pavements and things like that. And that's those little seeds. And on a nice windy day like this, it can just blow and blow, and they can blow a huge distance.
What are catkins?
So catkins are tree flowers, effectively. So the willow trees, they have catkins. And willows are a little unusual in that there's either female trees or male trees. And the bee needs to visit one and bring the pollen to the other, and then the female catkin, which is the flower, becomes fertilised, and then after a few weeks has those little seeds that blow off in the wind. Whereas birch trees now, for instance, or alder trees also have catkins, which are kind of long, dangly little things, nearly look like a kind of stiff brown caterpillar, actually, or a kind of greenish when they start and then they turn brown. And that's also the flowers on both birch and alder trees as well, and hazel trees, actually. Quite a few of our native trees have little catkins, and effectively they're tree flowers.
Oh. A caller has 2 white birds in her garden over the past few days. They're always together and they look like doves. What could they be?
They could well be doves, yeah. There's all sorts of different kinds of pigeons. If you think of any of our towns where you have the various different pigeons that they the way they breed, you can have all sorts of different variations in their colours and whatnot, and you think of the pigeons that you'll get in the likes of Dublin, and then people tend to release these white doves for weddings and for special ceremonies, and a good few of them will survive and do okay, and that might be what it is, because they wouldn't really be native doves, you wouldn't think, but they might be something that's been released, or they might be some kind of funny hybrid that has come from one of our towns.
A caller has woken up for the past few days to find that something has turned some sods in his garden. It looks like something a pig would do. What animal could it be?
Fantastic. Most likely a badger. Badgers are, they love to dig. They love to dig. And a badger will eat a plate of bugs and worms. And if you can imagine a big full dinner plate that you'd get at the nice big carvery lunch on a Sunday, that amount of worms and bugs, maybe up to 200 worms a day. And British badgers actually love to eat worms and nothing else. If they can't get only worms, they'll eat other things, whereas the Irish badgers are much more omnivorous. They will eat all sorts of different things, berries and seeds and whatnot. A little later in the year, they will take a shrew or a mouse if they come across it. They've been known to attack rats, and they'll dig away in the garden. So I will sometimes have them in my own garden too, and sometimes at night time you'll hear them because they can be noisy. They'll snuffle away and nearly sound a little bit like boars or pigs, I suppose. Right. Digging, looking for bugs, looking for leather jackets that might be eating the roots of your grass and that kind of stuff.
Right. I went out the other night and there was some birds flying around. Then I realised, no, that's not birds, that's bats. And I see someone says that we had about 6 bats flying mad around the one spot outside our house last night, flying towards the window and then away back again. What would they have been doing?
Fantastic. Well, the light from the window might have been attracting bugs, if you think of moths to the flame. So sometimes bats, if they're not finding, and at the moment actually this cold weather isn't helping. It isn't helping everything. A lot of our breeding birds will have just paused for a little while, slowed things down a bit. But the bats, they need to go out and they'll be heavily pregnant at this stage. So they'll need to eat a phenomenal amount of bugs, over 3,000 bugs every single night, keep their strength up. And with the cold weather and the windy weather, that's not really helping. So that can tend to lure them in to your window where the light might be on, which might have caught bugs. And they'll gobble up all those bugs for you, and then they'll be gone. But they're probably roosting pretty close by, within 1 kilometre or 2 of the house, which is a wonderful thing to have.
Okay. There we leave it. Just to remind any school teachers that might be listening in and might be interested that there's plenty of resources for them on your website.
Yeah, there's resources there. There's little videos there for anybody, actually, for families, with children, anybody who wants to explore their own gardens. And you'll get some ideas out of my own children and some of the exploring that they've done. So there's if you look on naturenorthwest.ie, and I have a little section called Rewild Your Child. But also there's for any teachers, if they want to register with the Donegal Education Centre, and then there's resources which have quizzes and follow-on information and teachers' notes and whatnot as well. And actually, I was asked just to mention again the Stories from the Water side, which is a lovely competition being run by the local authorities water and communities programme, and they want to just know your story, 600 words or less, about water, anything to do with water. Is it heritage stories that you've had, experiences that you've had, nice fishing trips you've had, anything like that, from the sea, from the rivers, from the lakes, from the estuaries. And there's such a huge amount of folklore around all of that kind of thing. And so if you look up the local water authority programme, you'll find them and that competition there.
Okay. Until next week, Angus. Thanks again.
That's great. Thanks very much, John.